MTV made the 80s feel permanent. Like, once a band broke through, they'd stay there forever. But that wasn't really how it worked, because just outside the spotlight, there were bands just as powerful.
Sentimental tears will get you as far as you might think they will.
Artists who arrived with a sound, left something unforgettable, and then disappeared before the decade could catch up. Tonight, we're diving into those after images. 10 forgotten 80s bands whose music still hits like it never left. And as this countdown climbs, one question lingers. Why do some of the most unforgettable bands vanish just as quickly as they arrive? Let's drop the needle. Number 1, The Lucy Show. Some bands don't just make songs, they create spaces you can step into. The Lucy Show worked that way. Their sound carried a layered atmosphere, where bright guitar textures met something deeper and more introspective. Tracks like Undone and A Million Things didn't demand attention right away. They revealed themselves slowly, pulling you in over time instead of pushing outward. There was a quiet confidence in that approach. Rhythms stayed steady, melodies expanded naturally, and emotion built through repetition rather than force. It gave their music a sense of depth that rewarded listeners who stayed with it, uncovering new details with each listen. College radio embraced that subtle pull, giving the band a loyal following that understood what they were building. But beyond that space, momentum never fully translated into wider recognition. And just as their world began to take shape, they disappeared from view, leaving behind something that still feels intact.
This distraction turns me.
Number 2, Blue Zoo.
Cry, boy, cry, the tears are a touch.
Blue Zoo didn't ease into a room, they lit it up instantly. Their sound captured that early 80s energy where rhythm, style, and attitude came together in a way that felt impossible to ignore. Songs like Cry Boy Cry and Love Moves in Strange Ways carried a sense of movement. Built on bouncing bass lines, sharp drum patterns, and hooks that landed quickly. But what made them stand out wasn't just energy, it was control. Their music wasn't chaotic or overextended. Every element felt deliberate, arranged with precision so that nothing crowded the sound. That balance gave their songs a lift that felt effortless, even when the structure underneath was carefully built.
New face emerging, pushing.
For a moment, everything aligned. Their image matched their sound, and their timing placed them right in step with where pop music was heading.
Touch inside. Cry, boy, cry.
But momentum in the 80s could shift quickly. And just as fast as they arrived, that spotlight moved on, leaving their sound frozen in that bright, fleeting moment.
I'm at the stage.
Number 3, Furniture.
You must be out of your brilliant mind.
Furniture approached music with restraint, but never uncertainty. Their sound was clean, measured, and intentional, built on the idea that emotion didn't need to be loud to be felt. Songs like Brilliant Mind
You must be out of your brilliant mind.
and Shaking Story reflected that balance.
It's a shaking story, it's a shaking story.
Controlled on the surface, but carrying something deeper just beneath it.
Running now, arms outstretched, up to.
There was a quiet confidence in how they held back. Instead of filling every space, they allowed their arrangements to breathe. Rhythms stayed steady, guitars remained precise, and vocals delivered emotion without ever pushing too far.
I want to know your secrets, but you are not telling.
It created a kind of tension that rewarded listeners who leaned in rather than those waiting for a bigger release. That approach set them apart in a decade often defined by excess.
You must be out of your brilliant mind.
But while their sound remained grounded, the environment around them didn't.
I've been places where I shouldn't go, but I can't come.
Industry challenges and shifting priorities narrowed their momentum over time, and gradually the spotlight moved elsewhere, even as the music itself remained unchanged.
I'm in love with the German film star
Number 4, The Passions.
I once saw in a movie.
The Passions understood something many bands overlooked, that what you leave out can be just as powerful as what you put in. Their music leaned into space, creating atmosphere instead of filling every moment. Songs like I'm in Love with a German Film Star
I'm in love with the German film star.
and Skin Deep carried a distant, almost dreamlike quality that felt immersive rather than immediate. Guitars shimmered instead of striking, rhythms moved with a soft, echoing pulse, and the vocals floated just above the mix, never fully grounding the listener.
Sitting in a corner in perfect clothes.
That sense of distance gave their sound a kind of mystery, where emotion wasn't directed, it was discovered. Listeners who connected with that approach tended to stay. The experience felt personal, almost private. But that same subtlety made wider recognition harder to sustain, and within a few years, the band quietly dissolved, leaving behind something that never fully faded.
I'm in love with the German film star.
If this kind of atmosphere still pulls you in, are you enjoying this video? If you are, please hit the like button. I'd sincerely appreciate it. And from that distant, dreamlike space, we move into something warmer, where structure replaces atmosphere and melody takes the lead.
The time for talking's over now. I guess it's time to let you go.
Number 5, Bourgeois Tagg.
But I'm smart enough to know.
Bourgeois Tagg built their sound on balance, but what set them apart was how effortless that balance felt. Their music carried a lightness that made it immediately accessible, yet underneath was careful construction. Songs like I Don't Mind at All
I don't mind at all.
and Mutual Surrender
What a wonderful world this could be, yeah.
revealed a band that understood how to shape melody without overcomplicating it. There was a quiet discipline in their approach. Harmonies were precise, arrangements stayed clean, and every element served the song rather than competing for attention.
And if you throw up your hands to me,
Instead of chasing intensity, they leaned into clarity, allowing emotion to come through naturally and without pressure.
But I don't see you laughing at me.
For a time, that approach connected. Airplay grew, audiences responded, and it seemed like they had found a path forward.
And misery loves company, but she will never put the bait.
But internally, creative differences began to surface, slowly pulling that balance apart. And once that foundation shifted, the momentum couldn't hold, leaving behind a sound that still feels complete.
sentimental tears will get you far as you might think they would.
And from that sense of balance, we move in the opposite direction, towards something more urgent, where motion drives everything forward.
Danced with wind and danced with fire, killed the truth and
Number 6, Red Rockers.
hides it all away. Joy.
Red Rockers sounded like a band in motion, caught between where they started and where they were headed. Their music carried both urgency and expansion, blending their earlier edge with a more polished, radio-ready direction. Songs like China and Good as Gold reflected that shift. showing a band reaching outward without losing its core identity. There was a sense of purpose in how their sound moved. Guitars pushed forward with clarity, rhythms stayed tight but flexible, and melodies opened up in a way that hinted at something bigger on the horizon.
But never seems to let you down.
It felt like a transition happening in real time, a band stepping into a wider space while still holding on to what made them distinct.
Last car on the gravy train, and you can't scream, and you can't.
For a moment, everything aligned. Attention grew, airplay followed, and it seemed like the next phase was already within reach.
Like a king without a throne, he builds his castle.
But in the fast-moving landscape of the 80s, momentum rarely waited, and before that evolution could fully take shape, it stalled. And from that forward motion, we move into something more immediate, where rhythm becomes the driving force.
We got the message. I heard it.
Number 7, Reflex.
The politics of dancing.
Reflex understood how to create impact the moment a song began. Their sound was built on rhythm, designed to move people instantly rather than gradually. Tracks like The Politics of Dancing
The politics of dancing.
and Hitline captured that energy, driven by tight grooves and a sense of momentum that felt immediate and shared. Everything in their music worked toward that feeling. Bass lines locked in, drums pushed forward, and synths added just enough texture without disrupting the flow. It created a sound that wasn't just heard, it was experienced, something that could fill a room and connect a crowd in real time. For a brief moment, that formula worked perfectly. The band found visibility, and their defining track carried far beyond expectations. But sustaining that level of attention proved difficult, and follow-ups never reached the same height, causing the momentum to fade almost as quickly as it arrived. Oh, by the way, I will be posting more videos like this, so please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next video. Okay, on to the next. And from that shared energy, we shift into something more unpredictable, where identity becomes both an advantage and a limitation. Number 8, Boys Don't Cry. Boys Don't Cry occupied a space that was both playful and calculated, a balance that made them stand out almost instantly. Their sound carried a light, catchy energy, but underneath was a structure that understood exactly how to hold attention. Songs like I Wanna Be a Cowboy,
I wanna be a cowboy.
and Cities on Fire showed how quickly they could lock into a hook and stay there. There was a sharp sense of identity in everything they did. Rhythms were direct, melodies were memorable, and their presentation carried just enough personality to feel distinct without losing focus.
Waking up every day. I'm feeling
For a moment, they held that balance perfectly, creating something that was easy to recognize and hard to forget.
Riding on the jack wagon, following.
But that same clarity became a limitation. Once expectations settled, expanding beyond that image became difficult, and the space to evolve started to narrow.
I wanna be a cowboy.
As a result, their success stayed tied to a moment rather than growing into something longer lasting.
Riding on the jack wagon, following my man.
And from that unpredictability, we move towards something more controlled, where structure quietly carries emotion.
Heaven is closer now today.
Number 9, Fiction Factory.
See how we plan for cyclone.
Fiction Factory built their sound on control, but what made them stand out was how naturally that control translated into emotion. Instead of overwhelming the listener, they allowed each moment to unfold with intention. Songs like Feels Like Heaven
Feels like heaven.
and Ghost of Love carried that balance.
Hate that ghost of love. Hate that.
Blending steady rhythms with melodies that revealed their impact over time. There was a quiet strength in their restraint. Vocals remained measured.
There is no time to sit and wonder.
Instrumentation stayed clean, and nothing pushed beyond what the song required. That approach gave their music a sense of clarity, where every element worked together without excess or distraction.
See how we plan for second eyes.
For a brief time, that balance connected in a meaningful way. It felt like the beginning of something that could grow into a lasting presence. But when follow-up releases failed to reach the same level of attention, the momentum narrowed quickly, and the window began to close before it fully opened.
I scream but no one knows. You say I'm familiar.
Do you think this band is one of the most underrated of the 80s? Comment yes if you agree.
See how we plan for second eyes.
And from that quiet precision, we arrive at something even more delicate, where music feels less like performance and more like memory.
What's this feeling? I think I hate.
Number 10, The Pale Fountains.
She's not happening no more.
The Pale Fountains felt like they existed just outside the pace of the 80s, moving with a sense of elegance that set them apart from the louder trends around them. Their music leaned into atmosphere and refinement, where songs like Jean's Not Happening
She's not happening no more.
and Thank You
Thank you for the tumult and lead time. It is so right.
carried a softness that felt deliberate rather than understated. There was a clear sense of identity in their restraint.
To myself, there's no place I'd run.
Arrangements were spacious, instruments moved with purpose, and melodies unfolded with a kind of quiet confidence.
And you know, 8 more minutes of this, and I think I'm gonna.
Instead of chasing immediacy, they allowed their sound to settle, creating something that felt timeless rather than tied to a specific moment.
What's this feeling? I think I hate.
Critics recognized that distinction, and listeners who found them often held on. But broader success never fully followed, and as the decade pushed forward, their presence began to fade from view.
She's like the pouring rain.
Still, the music remains unchanged, resurfacing over time as something that never needed the spotlight to endure. And with that, we come full circle, back to the question of what it really means for a band to disappear. So maybe disappearing doesn't mean failing. Maybe it means leaving at just the right moment, before the sound fades, before the edges soften, before the memory has time to blur. Because these bands didn't really vanish, they just slipped out of the spotlight. And somehow, that made them last longer. Now, I want to hear from you. What's a forgotten 80s band you still come back to? Drop it in the comments. Hit like if this brought something back, and subscribe to Retro Remix for more deep dives into the music that refuses to disappear.